It began with a discovery no one inside Buckingham Palace expected. Hidden among Queen Elizabeth II's private correspondence were letters that had remained unseen for years. But when royal solicitors finally examined their contents, one name appeared again and again: Catherine. And within hours, whispers spread through the palace corridors, leaving Queen Camilla completely blindsided by what the late queen had quietly preserved. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. At first, few people inside royal circles believed the matter would amount to anything extraordinary. After all, Queen Elizabeth had spent decades writing letters, exchanging private notes, and preserving memories that reflected both her duties and the relationships she valued throughout her historic reign. Yet this particular collection was different, carefully stored away and rarely discussed. The correspondence had remained untouched through years of changing circumstances, royal transitions, and moments of turmoil that had tested the institution itself. Nobody expected that among those pages, one name would emerge so consistently that even experienced legal advisors found themselves pausing in surprise. As the review continued, the atmosphere surrounding the discovery began to shift. Palace insiders, who had initially treated the process as routine, suddenly became unusually cautious. Conversations grew quieter, questions multiplied. Why had these letters remained hidden for so long? And why had Queen Elizabeth felt compelled to mention Catherine so frequently in writings that were never intended for public eyes? Those closest to the institution understood that the late monarch chose her words carefully. She rarely committed personal feelings to paper without purpose. That reality alone transformed the letters from historical curiosities into something far more profound. Meanwhile, whispers quietly spread beyond the legal teams responsible for cataloging the documents. Senior members of the royal household reportedly learned that Catherine's name appeared repeatedly, often in passages connected to duty, continuity, and the future of the crown. Such revelations inevitably attracted attention, but they also carried emotional weight. The Queen's private thoughts had always remained among the most closely guarded treasures of the monarchy. To discover traces of her deepest reflections emerging years after her passing was enough to unsettle even the most seasoned courtiers. Then came the moment that reportedly caught Queen Camilla entirely by surprise. News of the letters reached senior figures within the palace, triggering a wave of speculation that few had anticipated. Suddenly, questions about the late Queen's intentions resurfaced with renewed intensity. Why had she preserved these writings? Why had they remained unseen until now? And perhaps most significantly, what exactly had she wanted future generations to understand? Those questions would soon lead historians and royal advisors down a path that stretched far beyond the present day and deep into some of the most delicate chapters of Elizabeth's reign. But the existence of the letters was only the beginning, because their origins reached back to some of the most delicate moments of Elizabeth's reign. Long before succession debates and family tensions dominated headlines, Queen Elizabeth had been quietly documenting her thoughts. What began as personal reflections slowly evolved into something far more significant. And as historians and advisors studied the letters, they realized the late monarch had left behind more than memories. She had preserved her deepest impressions of the woman destined to become queen. The more experts examined the remarkable collection, the clearer one truth became. Queen Elizabeth had never viewed correspondence as a simple exchange of words. Throughout her 70-year reign, writing had been one of the few private rituals she guarded fiercely. While public duties consumed her days and constitutional responsibilities shaped her decisions, she quietly maintained a habit that allowed her to record emotions, concerns, and observations that rarely reached the outside world. Over decades, those letters transformed into something deeply personal, creating an extraordinary record of a monarch, determined to preserve her thoughts for reasons known only to herself. What astonished historians most was the recurring theme that seemed to echo through many of those pages: duty, stability, continuity. Again and again, the late queen returned to those principles. They had guided her throughout her life, and according to those who studied the documents, they appeared to occupy a central place in her reflections about the future. In that future, Catherine's name emerged with surprising consistency, not through grand declarations or dramatic expressions, but through quiet observations that reportedly revealed how deeply the Princess of Wales had earned the monarch's admiration over the years. Those who served within the palace had long witnessed the bond developing between the two women. It had not been built overnight. There had been no sudden moment that changed everything. Instead, trust had grown slowly, almost imperceptibly, strengthened through shared responsibilities and a mutual understanding of what life inside the monarchy demanded. As the years passed, palace staff quietly noticed the ease that existed between them, while others often found themselves overwhelmed by the pressures surrounding royal life. Catherine appeared to approach her responsibilities with patience and restraint, qualities many believed resonated deeply with Queen Elizabeth herself. As those memories resurfaced, historians began viewing the letters as far more than personal writings. They represented fragments of history, rare glimpses into the mind of a sovereign whose thoughts had remained carefully protected for generations. Yet alongside the fascination came another question, one that refused to disappear. Had Queen Elizabeth intended these letters to be discovered? Or had fate alone brought them into the hands of the very people now studying them? Some believed the answer lay in the Queen's lifelong understanding of legacy. Others wondered whether she had knowingly left behind a final message, trusting that time itself would reveal what she could never say publicly. And as speculation intensified, another realization slowly emerged. It was not merely Catherine's presence within the correspondence that captured attention. It was the warmth, the consistency, and the unmistakable significance attached to those references. Senior advisors found themselves revisiting passages again and again, aware that they were uncovering something far more profound than anyone had anticipated. Because hidden within those pages was a story capable of reshaping perceptions, reigniting old tensions, and sending shockwaves through the palace itself. Yet what truly stunned royal observers was not that Catherine had been mentioned, but the extraordinary nature of those mentions. As the contents became clearer, even seasoned palace veterans struggled to hide their surprise. These were not ordinary remarks. They revealed a level of admiration that many had never imagined. And with every page examined, the picture of Catherine's place in Elizabeth's heart became impossible to ignore. What had initially appeared to be scattered references soon revealed a pattern that even veteran royal advisors found difficult to dismiss. The repeated mentions were not accidental. Again and again, Queen Elizabeth's private words returned to the same themes: character, humility, dedication, qualities that the late monarch had spent a lifetime valuing above status or popularity, seemed to emerge naturally whenever Catherine entered her reflections. Those studying the correspondence reportedly noticed how consistently these qualities surfaced, creating the impression that the Queen had viewed the Princess of Wales through a lens shaped not by public image, but by years of quiet observation. For historians, the significance of that realization was impossible to overlook. Royal archives had preserved countless documents over the decades, yet very few offered such deeply personal insights into the mind of Britain's longest-serving monarch. What fascinated experts was not merely the existence of praise, but the sincerity that appeared to accompany it. Queen Elizabeth had always been known for restraint. She guarded her emotions carefully and rarely expressed strong opinions openly. That made the tone found within these letters all the more remarkable. It suggested that Catherine's place within the institution had become something far more meaningful than many outside observers had previously understood. Naturally, comparisons began to emerge. Within private royal circles, discussions reportedly turned toward other senior members of the family and the different paths they had taken over the years. Some saw the correspondence as evidence of Elizabeth's her quiet service and steadfast loyalty. Others interpreted the writings as a reflection of the values the late queen hoped would guide the monarchy long after her own reign had ended. Whatever the interpretation, one thing became increasingly difficult to deny. Catherine's presence within these pages stood apart in ways few had anticipated. Behind closed doors, conversations intensified. Courtiers exchanged theories. Historians revisited old memories. Royal commentators quietly debated whether the letters represented something larger than personal affection. Had Queen Elizabeth intended to leave behind clues about the future? Was she consciously preserving her thoughts for generations yet to come? Or had these documents simply become unintended treasures, revealing emotions that she never expected anyone else to read? The mystery only deepened with every new detail that emerged. Perhaps most astonishing of all was the belief that Catherine herself remained unaware of some of the contents being uncovered. Those who knew her often described a woman focused more on duty than recognition, making the revelations all the more extraordinary. While speculation swirled and theories multiplied, the Princess of Wales reportedly continued carrying out her responsibilities without any indication of the profound impact these discoveries were having behind palace walls. Yet the emotional significance of the letters had already begun to ripple outward, and not everyone received the news with the same sense of wonder. Because while historians viewed the findings with fascination and royal insiders wrestled with their implications, another figure inside the monarchy reportedly experienced the revelations in an entirely different way. For one person, the discovery was not simply surprising, it was deeply unsettling. And as whispers continued to spread through the palace, the consequences of those hidden words were only beginning to unfold. But if the letters surprised historians, they reportedly struck Queen Camilla with far greater force. For Queen Camilla, the revelation came without warning. Palace sources described an atmosphere of disbelief as news spread among senior aides. Because while few questioned Elizabeth's affection for Catherine, nobody expected the late monarch's private writings to place such remarkable emphasis on the future Princess of Wales. What had fascinated historians and intrigued royal advisors reportedly carried a very different emotional weight inside the highest levels of the palace. According to whispers circulating among senior circles, news of the contents reached Queen Camilla through officials involved in the ongoing review. At first, many believed the matter would remain little more than a historical curiosity. Yet, as details slowly emerged, it became increasingly clear that these were not ordinary observations hidden within old correspondence. The language, the consistency, and the unmistakable warmth surrounding Catherine's name transformed what should have been a routine examination into something far more powerful. Even experienced advisors found themselves caught off guard. For years, countless assumptions had been made about the private relationships that shaped Queen Elizabeth's reign. Yet few imagined that her personal reflections would reveal such a profound level of admiration for the woman who had quietly entered the royal family decades earlier. Those closest to the institution understood the significance immediately. Queen Elizabeth had spent a lifetime choosing her words carefully. She had never been one for excessive praise or emotional declarations, which made the repeated emphasis within these letters all the more extraordinary. Behind closed doors, tensions reportedly began to surface. Not openly, not dramatically, but in the subtle ways that have always defined royal life. Conversations became more guarded. Discussions that once seemed routine suddenly carried greater importance. Senior aides understood that private writings from Britain's longest-serving monarch possessed enormous emotional influence, and the implications of their contents were impossible to ignore. As speculation intensified, royal commentators and historians found themselves examining every possible meaning hidden between the lines. At the same time, memories from years gone by began resurfacing. Stories that had long faded into the background suddenly took on new significance. Observers recalled the steady trust that had grown between Queen Elizabeth and Catherine. They remembered the occasions when the late monarch quietly offered guidance, the moments when shared responsibilities forged understanding, and the years during which mutual respect deepened beyond public view. What once seemed like ordinary interactions now appeared to many as pieces of a much larger story, one that Queen Elizabeth herself had preserved through her own words. Meanwhile, courtiers reportedly worked tirelessly to ensure that discussions remained private. The palace had always preferred silence over spectacle, but secrets of this magnitude rarely remain confined forever. Curiosity outside royal circles continued to grow. Commentators debated the meaning of the letters. Historians explored their significance, and members of the public found themselves captivated by the mystery surrounding what the late Queen had chosen to record. The more attention the documents received, the more impossible it became to contain the questions they inspired. Yet beneath the fascination and the quiet tensions, another realization was beginning to emerge. The correspondence was revealing something far bigger than anyone had anticipated. Because these letters were not simply snapshots of recent years, they were fragments of a relationship that had been developing over decades. Hidden within those pages was a story rooted in loyalty, trust, and the steady evolution of a bond that stretched back far further than most people realized. And as experts continued their work, they discovered that the origins of that story reached into some of the most defining chapters of Elizabeth's remarkable reign. But the deeper experts looked into the letters, the more they discovered a story stretching across decades. The relationship between Queen Elizabeth and Catherine had never been built on grand gestures. Instead, it was forged through years of quiet service, shared responsibilities, and unwavering commitment. And those closest to the crown understood that this connection had become one of the late Queen's greatest sources of confidence in the monarchy's future. Long before the letters emerged, and long before speculation began sweeping through royal circles, the foundation of that relationship had already been established through patience and trust. Catherine had never rushed to claim a place within the institution. Those who had observed her journey over the years often remarked that she approached royal life with remarkable restraint, understanding that respect inside the monarchy was not something granted overnight. It had to be earned. And according to many who served alongside Queen Elizabeth, that gradual process became one of the defining features of the bond that eventually developed between the two women. There had been no dramatic turning point, no singular event that transformed their relationship. Instead, years of shared responsibilities quietly strengthened their connection. State duties, family occasions, and the endless rhythm of royal obligations brought them together time and time again. Through moments of national celebration and periods of uncertainty, Catherine consistently demonstrated the qualities Queen Elizabeth valued most: duty before recognition, stability over drama, service above self-interest. Those principles had guided the late monarch throughout her extraordinary reign, and many believed she recognized those same values in the woman who would one day stand beside the future king. Palace insiders often recalled the sense of calm Catherine brought to difficult situations. While public attention frequently focused on personalities and headlines, Queen Elizabeth reportedly admired something much simpler: a steady temperament, a thoughtful approach, an ability to carry enormous responsibilities without seeking constant attention. Those qualities may not have generated sensational stories, but within the world of monarchy, they represented something far more precious: reliability. And for a sovereign who had spent decades protecting the institution from uncertainty, reliability was invaluable. Over time, mutual respect became impossible to miss. Staff members who worked closely with both women often noticed an ease between them that reflected years of understanding. there was no need for grand displays. Their relationship had evolved beyond appearances. Historians examining the newly discovered correspondence began viewing that bond as part of a much broader vision Queen Elizabeth had held for the monarchy's future. They believed the late Queen saw continuity not as something achieved through dramatic declarations, but through individuals capable of preserving stability in uncertain times. And within that vision, Catherine appeared to occupy a place of enormous significance. The letters themselves only reinforced those impressions. Far from presenting sudden revelations, they seemed to confirm what many had quietly suspected for years. The admiration, the trust, and the confidence reflected within those private writings painted the picture of a relationship built through decades of loyalty and shared purpose. Yet even as experts uncovered layer after layer of this remarkable story, they sensed that something even greater remained hidden among the archives. Because the deeper they ventured into Queen Elizabeth's preserved thoughts, the more they realized they had only begun to understand the full scope of what she had chosen to leave behind. And somewhere within those pages, buried beneath decades of memories and reflections, another revelation was waiting patiently to emerge. One that promised to deepen the mystery even further, and perhaps explain why these extraordinary documents had survived in the first place. Yet perhaps the most remarkable chapter was still waiting to emerge from the archives. Once word of the letters reached wider royal circles, reactions were impossible to contain. Courtiers whispered, historians debated, and advisors recognized that these documents carried emotional significance far beyond simple correspondence, because they offered a rare glimpse into Queen Elizabeth's private thoughts about the future of the crown itself. What had begun as a quiet legal review had now evolved into something much larger. Within royal circles, the atmosphere shifted noticeably as more people became aware of the extraordinary contents hidden within the late Queen's private papers. Palace figures who had initially regarded the discovery as little more than an archival exercise suddenly found themselves confronting questions that touched the very heart of the monarchy. The correspondence was no longer being viewed simply as a collection of old letters. To many, it represented the final reflections of a sovereign who had spent 70 years safeguarding the institution she devoted her life to protecting. Behind closed doors, conversations multiplied. Senior figures reportedly exchanged opinions in hushed tones, careful not to allow private discussions to spill into the public domain. Yet even among those accustomed to preserving discretion, there was no denying the emotional impact these documents had created. Historians, constitutional experts, and trusted advisors recognized that they were witnessing something exceptionally rare. Queen Elizabeth had always maintained an extraordinary level of discipline regarding her personal views. To discover fragments of those thoughts, preserved in writing, felt almost like hearing a voice that had fallen silent years earlier speak once more. Royal historians quickly immersed themselves in the material, determined to understand its broader significance. For them, the letters offered much more than sentimental memories. They provided insight into how the late monarch viewed continuity, stability, and the individuals she believed embodied those values. The more experts studied the correspondence, the more fascination grew. Newspapers, commentators, and royal observers became increasingly captivated by the Sternstebachig in Kurtz, while debates over legacy and succession quietly, unsurprisingly, attention continued to center on Catherine. Her name, already the subject of endless speculation, became even more closely associated with the remarkable discoveries emerging from the archives. Supporters viewed the letters as confirmation of the deep respect Queen Elizabeth held for the Princess of Wales. Others simply wondered what the late Queen had seen in Catherine that inspired such consistent admiration. Whatever the interpretation, the effect was undeniable. Catherine's role within discussions about the future of the monarchy appeared more prominent than ever. Meanwhile, Buckingham Palace remained noticeably silent. No official statements were issued. no efforts were made to publicly explain the significance of the letters. Such restraint only fueled further curiosity. Royal commentators dissected every available detail. Historians revisited old events. Courtiers quietly speculated about meanings hidden beneath carefully chosen words. And as public fascination intensified, one mystery overshadowed all others. Because amid the admiration, the debates, and the growing fascination surrounding Queen Elizabeth's private thoughts, a troubling question refused to disappear. It lingered within royal circles. It haunted historians, and it quietly unsettled those closest to the institution. If these letters carried such profound emotional significance, why had they remained hidden for so many years? Why had no one seen them before? And perhaps most intriguingly of all, had the late Queen intended for them to surface at precisely this moment? Those questions would soon lead experts toward an even deeper mystery, one capable of transforming everything they thought they understood about the extraordinary legacy Queen Elizabeth had left behind. But one question continued to haunt everyone involved. Why had these letters remained hidden until now? The timing of the discovery raised eyebrows throughout Britain. Why now? Why had such personal writings stayed hidden for years? And as experts searched for answers, theories multiplied, adding another layer of mystery to an already extraordinary royal story. Almost immediately, the questions began. Historians asked them. Commentators debated them. Even those closest to the institution reportedly found themselves wondering whether coincidence alone could explain the extraordinary timing of the discovery. For years, Queen Elizabeth's personal correspondence had remained tucked away, untouched by public scrutiny, and protected by the same culture of discretion that had defined her reign. Yet now, long after her passing, these deeply personal reflections had suddenly emerged, reigniting conversations that many believed had already become part of history. To some observers, it seemed almost impossible to ignore the strange timing. Legal experts pointed toward procedure. They noted that the administration of royal papers often followed complex processes designed to protect privacy and preserve historical significance. Some suggested that certain collections may have required years of cataloging before they could be properly examined. Others believed administrative reviews or archival transfers could explain why the letters had remained hidden from public knowledge. Those explanations carried weight. Yet for many historians, they still failed to answer the larger question that continued to linger over the entire affair. Because there were those who wondered whether Queen Elizabeth herself had understood exactly what she was doing. Throughout her reign, she had demonstrated an extraordinary awareness of history and legacy. She knew better than anyone that words preserved on paper often outlived those who wrote them. That realization led some experts to consider a remarkable possibility. Perhaps the late monarch never intended her thoughts to disappear entirely. Perhaps she understood that one day, when the time was right, they would speak for her in ways she could never publicly express. Inside palace walls, however, silence reportedly remained the preferred response. Senior insiders avoided speculation. Courtiers stayed remarkably guarded. If private conversations were taking place, they remained hidden behind the traditions of confidentiality that have long protected the monarchy. Yet that silence itself only fueled curiosity. In the absence of clear answers, theories flourished. Some saw deliberate planning. Others believed fate had simply intervened. No matter the explanation, the mystery surrounding the letters captured the imagination of the public in ways few had anticipated. Royal commentators devoted endless attention to the debate. Newspapers revisited memories of Elizabeth's reign. Historians searched for clues buried within decades of royal history. And ordinary people found themselves captivated by the idea that the late Queen's voice might still be quietly influencing the future she had spent a lifetime preparing to safeguard. The uncertainty, the unanswered questions, and the emotional weight attached to the discovery transformed the letters into something larger than anyone had imagined. Yet amid the speculation and mystery, something even more remarkable slowly emerged, because the true significance of the correspondence did not lie in when the letters had surfaced, nor in why they had remained hidden. Those questions, while fascinating, ultimately pointed toward a deeper truth. Hidden within Queen Elizabeth's carefully chosen words was something far more enduring than intrigue or controversy. It was a reflection of the values she cherished most, and perhaps the clearest indication yet of the future she had quietly hoped to leave behind. But beyond the mystery and speculation, the letters ultimately revealed something far more profound. In the end, the story was never simply about surprise or palace intrigue. It was about legacy. Through words written in private and preserved across the years, Queen Elizabeth had left behind a deeply personal record of what mattered most to her. And in those pages, Catherine emerged as a figure who represented continuity, service, and the future of the monarchy. As historians and royal experts gradually stepped back from the mystery surrounding the discovery itself, a different realization began to take shape. The significance of the letters extended far beyond the headlines they had generated. These writings had become part of Queen Elizabeth's historical legacy, joining the countless records and memories that would forever define one of the most remarkable reigns in British history. Yet, unlike official speeches or public appearances, these pages carried something far more intimate. They revealed not simply the actions of a monarch, but the thoughts of a woman who had spent a lifetime protecting the institution she loved. In many ways, the discovery renewed attention toward Catherine's role within the royal family. While she had spent years fulfilling her responsibilities with quiet determination, the correspondence appeared to reinforce the image that many had long associated with the Princess of Wales. Not an image built on popularity or spectacle, but one rooted in stability, patience, and service. Those qualities had mattered deeply to Queen Elizabeth, and according to many observers, the letters reflected precisely why the late monarch had come to value Catherine's presence so profoundly. For historians, the documents represented something equally important. They served as a reminder that private correspondence often preserves truths that public records cannot fully capture. Official duties reveal what monarchs do. Personal reflections reveal what they feel. That distinction transformed the letters into treasures of enormous historical significance. Future generations, scholars, and royal historians would undoubtedly continue examining them, searching for deeper understanding of the values that guided Queen Elizabeth throughout her reign. Meanwhile, public fascination showed no signs of fading. The mystery surrounding the letters may have sparked the world's attention, but it was their emotional weight that ensured their lasting impact. Discussions about continuity, tradition, and the future of the monarchy gained fresh momentum. For many people, the correspondence represented evidence that Queen Elizabeth's influence had not ended with her passing. In some ways, it seemed stronger than ever. Even in silence, her voice continued to resonate. Even in absence, her presence remained unmistakable. Perhaps that was the most extraordinary revelation of all. Long after ceremonies had ended and tributes had faded, Queen Elizabeth's beliefs and values still possessed the power to shape conversations inside and outside the palace walls. And for the royal family itself, the story left an impression that would not easily disappear. Because hidden among decades of memories, the late queen had preserved something timeless, a portrait of the future she believed in, and the principles she hoped would endure. And so, what began as an unexpected discovery ultimately became something far greater. Not a story of rivalry, not a tale of scandal, but a reminder that legacies are not measured only by crowns, titles, or ceremonies. They are measured by the people who carry forward the values that matter most. And through those carefully preserved words, Queen Elizabeth had left behind one final testament to duty, continuity, and faith in the future of the monarchy she served so faithfully. And although the late queen's voice had long fallen silent, the words she left behind would continue shaping perceptions of the monarchy for generations to come. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.